the spotted eagle rays that are normally transients, they don't stick around, who at first were curious about our activities around Aquarius, but ended up sticking around for a full 31 days, visiting us every morning at about the same time. They would swim around, and at first, you're fascinated by them because they buzz right in front of you and swim around and do it again and in front of the viewports and all that. And after a while, you kind of get blasé about that amazing experience. And so you go about your business of taking sponge samples and so on and so forth on the reef. And next thing I know, the eagle ray that I was originally looking at every day, I wasn't paying much attention to, would come closer and closer and eventually would slap the back of my helmet as if to say, hey, pay attention to me. What's going on? You don't love me anymore?
Fabien, some people may not know who your grandfather was. Yeah. So, and so just give us the little, I mean, we obviously do, but give us the little story of him and just, you can't tell a story in a minute, but just, I mean, he's a giant, the giant of the sea. So please tell.
Jacque Cousteau, it was, of course, he was my grandfather. He married Simone Cousteau, my grandmother, who had always wanted to be a Navy officer, but back in those days, that was not possible. This is during World War II, actually, even before World War II. And so their love of adventure brought them together. Now, my grandfather, from a very young age, was always a filmmaker. Since he was a teenager, he loved making films. And World War II happened. He originally enlisted in the Air Force, but had a life-altering accident that drove him towards the ocean, thanks to some friends who helped him rehabilitate his broken arm and broken leg that were supposed to be amputated. And thankfully, they were not. He insisted on rehabilitating. When he first peeked under the ocean, and this was back in the days when underwater cameras didn't exist, submarines for scientific research didn't exist, none of that stuff existed, much less Nat Geo, Netflix, and all that. That really grabbed his curiosity and his frustration of not being able to go down and film the things that were wondrous and mysterious and just new and revolutionary to him, drove him to co-invent the aqualung, which is the thing we still use today to go scuba diving. He built the first underwater submarines for scientific research. He built the first underwater cameras to be able to film underwater, way before GoPros and Nikonos ones and all that stuff. As a matter of fact, he was instrumental in helping co-develop the Nikonos One, which then kicked off the ability for the public to take photos and video underwater. He built the first underwater habitat for scientific research to understand if physiologically we could do it and what was to be gained by a platform like this. And so all those things drove him to a 50-plus year career where he produced over 134 documentaries, several big screen films that won Oscars and Palme d'Or for documentaries as well, and dozens and dozens of books that impassioned people for millions and millions of people around the world for those decades. This was pre-internet, really. I mean, the internet had just begun when he passed away, begun in what we would consider modern internet. And so, considering the traditional nature of storytelling through those media that he had at his disposal, he was more recognized 18 out of 20 years than the US president in the United States.
Wow. And
we're just talking about the United States. In Europe, he's still very, very well known, and around other parts of the world as well. US is a different market. We're very overstimulated by things, and our interests go all over the place. But he's still, as far as the ocean's concerned, considered a pioneer and an icon.
And you are in the family business, and you continue on, right?
Well, the family, I was never pushed into the family business. I was never encouraged or influenced in that way. As a matter of fact, my grandparents and my parents wanted us to make our own choices. But when you're surrounded by passionate people, when you're surrounded by amazing teachers, guides in life, and I'm blessed to have my family to be those people, and our crew members that have worked with us over the years to be really amazing experts in their own fields that have permeated throughout my life. It's impossible to break those bonds of curiosity and passion. I've tried other things. I've been financially more successful at business type of careers, by meaning I had a better paycheck. But honestly, it didn't pay me the way emotionally ocean exploration pays. And that really is, at the end of the day, something that I feel can be not only selfishly for me a reward, but also something that I can then share with those who will never get a chance to see the ocean.
When you see what's happening in the upper United States these days with temperatures being 120, 125 in Portland, what are your thoughts?
Very simple. Predictable. Predictable because of our ineptitude to get out of our own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I hate to sound so down and pessimistic, but my grandfather was talking about climate change in the 1950s.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not a new topic. This is not a new trajectory. It's not something we didn't know anything about that just popped up on the radar. This is something that scientists have been studying for decades and have been warning us for at least that long. So am I surprised? No. Are we going to suffer for it because we've waited so long? Yes. and now the question is, how much can we get done now that we're behind that we're late to the game? And how quickly can we stabilize or try to stabilize what's happening with mitigation of our actions?
Do you think that we can go backwards, or is the question just in climate about stopping it where it is?
You can't go back. We're not going backwards. Not in our generation. If you look at the trajectory, we may see a slowdown and possibly, I mean, again, it depends on how old you are, but we may see a slowdown and possibly a stagnation of temperature increases in our lifetimes if we act quickly. It's interesting how nature has a tendency to heal itself if you give it a chance, but I don't see a reversal in trends anytime soon. I mean, a reversal in temperatures anyway, anytime soon. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I hope humanity proves me wrong.
You're going to build a space station under the sea. Now, you went on the first sort of prototypes of that. What's your first memory of the ocean?
Well, I wish I'd gone on the first prototypes of that. I'm not old enough, unfortunately.
You went on the second one, right?
Well, my grandfather built the first underwater habitats, 1961, 63, and 64. 1961 was Conch Shelf 1, followed by some American exploits in 62, I believe. Mm-hmm. And there have been habitats since. I wasn't born until 1967, so now you know how old I am.
Yeah.
So I missed that entire first chapter of underwater habitats, unfortunately. The habitat I did get to go to, which in many ways is very reminiscent of the originals, is Aquarius. Aquarius was built in 1984, I believe, somewhere around there. And by and large, it's very unique because it's the only functioning undersea marine laboratory left in existence that we know of.
Right.
There are a couple that have been converted to these very niche experiences, underwater hotel type of experiences. La Chalupa, which was an underwater habitat at first, or which was an underwater research station at first, became an underwater hotel. There's a couple others that have been decommissioned that you can go and visit on land, and most of them have been scrapped. So
why have they been scrapped?
Scrapped because they got old. Just like any marine vessel after a while, or any technology after a while, they get old. I would say Aquarius is a dinosaur as well, but it's the only one of its kind, and it's got quite a legacy. But it's 1980s technology. We're 2021. It's high time we look at something much more modern, much more expansive, much more capable of keeping up with today's demands.
So what's the vision of this space station under the water? And what do you call it? Because it's not a space station, it's a water station.
Well, it's an inner space station. We do call it the space station of the sea because, as opposed to past generations of habitats, We're building on pioneering efforts of great people who've been before us, aquanauts and such, and we're addressing a lot of the shortcomings and frustrations that they've had. Instead of building something that is 400 internal square feet, for example, where you cram 6 people and as much as you can in terms of equipment, and then you put them down at the bottom for days or maybe a couple weeks. Now we're building something that is 10 times the size of Aquarius, that gives us and affords us the ability to cater to at least twice as many people for indefinite periods of time, not days or weeks, but weeks, months, most likely longer. And we're able to afford for those research teams to have the most advanced equipment at the final frontier during the time that they're down there. Because one thing that an underwater habitat structure offers that no other tool in the toolbox of ocean exploration does is the luxury of time at the bottom of the sea. And I'm a big proponent of technology in general, AUVs, ROVs, submersibles, all sorts of diving technologies, boats, etc. But none of those offer what a habitat does. And so it's a complement to the toolbox. And it's one that is a platform that is stable, that gives us the ability to do mid and long-term research the way none of the other platforms can. That gives us a reach on a specific area that none of the other platforms really are efficient at doing. And so it gives great ability. Now, Proteus, which is the habitat I'm talking about, the International Inner Space Station, is also modular in nature, which again has never been incorporated into past habitats. And by modular, I mean that the sections of the habitat themselves can be attached and detached as needs be, to upgrade them, to switch them out, to add on sections. And the internal infrastructure is also modular, so that as technologies in scientific equipment are upgraded, we can upgrade as well easily, which is something that has not really been afforded until modern technologies, meaning the last 10 years or so.
Now,
So we really do want this to have a lifespan. I mean, most habitats in the past were slated for specific missions. So they were pulled out after a month or 2 months or 6 months or a specific amount of time. I mean, Aquarius was built probably for 5-6 years, and here it is 30 plus years down the road. So imagine an underwater habitat 10 times that size that's built to specs for at least 15 years, what its capabilities might be.
why 60 feet? Why is that an important depth? Why did you select that?
So we could have selected a much deeper depth. 60 feet really is the threshold for which human physiology is maxed out as far as oxygen exposure. So you've got 3 atmospheres of oxygen in your breathing atmospheres. And anything more than that, oxygen has a propensity to become toxic on long-term exposure. So you don't want to go beyond that threshold. It's actually 2.7 atmospheres or something like that. That's where the air-water interface has to be. Now, we can mix gas. But mixed gas is very expensive, and it also requires special training. And what the purpose of Proteus is to have a platform that maximizes the offerings and abilities to the greatest number of researchers and people.
Now, why not a submarine? Why a space station?
Well, think about it. What's a submarine? It's a bubble.
Right.
You're segregated from the environment. You can't go down for very long. 8 hours, 10 hours max.
Right.
And you have to come back up. And you can't touch the environment. It's very difficult to take samples with a submarine. I've done it many times. It has its advantages. You can go very deep if it's built properly, if it's built for depth. You can observe things in very unique ways. It's an amazing tool for a very specific type of function. As a matter of fact, Proteus has a submarine hangar built in so that you can use a submarine from Proteus. But in order for a lot of the sensitive work that scientists do on, say, a coral reef or some sort of substrate or some sort of organism, you need to be able to have tactile, delicate touch, right? And also a lot of the equipment that's used in controlled environments on land are very fragile in and of themselves and very expensive. So you need to have that human element, that human touch to be able to install, manipulate, and do whatever needs to be done on that final frontier. But the only way we can do it, I mean, robots are still not perfected enough to have such a delicate type of manipulation ability. That's not to say that we won't use robots for certain things, cleaning the windows, monitoring hydrocarbon pollution, looking at microplastic concentrations and such. But for other types of maneuvers, the human element is absolutely necessary.
So Fabien, for people that don't know kind of, what is possible and why we need to go into the ocean and what we can learn there. I mean, you've talked about so many different areas of interest educationally and also real serious problem solving. I think I heard you even speak about we can study pandemics. So give us some of the, incredible opportunity and how it is that you can only study this at the bottom of the ocean. And what does that even mean? And, set the stage for us, for all of us who are land bound, at least I am.
Sure. Well, and you're not unique. I mean, there are only about 3 million active scuba divers around the world. So those who pierce below the blue veneer are either doing it on vacation or snorkeling, and a few of us are scuba divers. But the vast majority of people will never get a chance to go down to the bottom of the ocean for extended periods of time. And that's a very important distinction, mainly because whether we're on the ocean front or 1,000 miles away skiing on top of a mountain, we're all connected by ocean. Water connects us all. Imagine if our planet didn't have an ocean. Imagine if our planet had no water. We wouldn't exist. None of the organisms that we love, depend on, imagine, etc., would exist. This would be another brown, lifeless rock floating in space. The only thing that makes our planet unique is water. We were born of water. All organisms, at least scientifically speaking, started off because there was water on this planet. And it's a life support system. So it generates about 60% of the oxygen that we breathe. I know a lot of people don't know that. Most of the food, whether it's sea life or terrestrial food that we depend on for sustenance or for a living, is generated by the ocean, directly or indirectly, either through rainfall or through weather patterns or what have you, or quite simply from the flora and fauna in the ocean that we fish out. Additionally, the ocean is something that, if you're looking at it just from dollars and cents, and the ocean is the 7th largest per the United Nations numbers, the 7th largest GDP in the world. I personally think it's a gross underestimate because you're talking about things that are intangibles. Every other breath that we take is generated by the ocean. Every glass of water we drink is thanks to the ocean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That said, we explored less than 5% of our ocean world to this day, which is shocking because you'd think in all of modern day ocean exploration, we'd do much more. But the reality is, at least in the United States, we spend 1,000 times more in space exploration than ocean exploration. And if you look at what makes life possible, what makes economic viability possible in so many industries, it's thanks to the ocean. And we know so little about it. So imagine trying to mitigate problems, for example, storm surges, loss of life, loss of property, and so on and so forth. If we don't know anything about the ocean, we have a really hard time gauging when to act and when not to be able to minimize those damages. Look at other things. We farm on land. We've been farming on land for 10,000 years. We're just now starting to dabble in ocean farming. We need to stop hunter-gathering, the clear cutters of the ocean, longliners and purse seiners and all. We need to get rid of that stuff. We're destroying everything before we even get the chance to explore it. And we're now down to, we've wiped out about 60% of our world's wild fish stocks because of our delusion of thinking that this is an endless resource and a garbage can for all of us to use. We're now starting to see the closed loop of this problem by the fact that wild caught anything, the prices are skyrocketing, so no one can afford it. We're looking at the fact that everything has microplastics in it, including ourselves. We have about a credit card size worth of plastic in our own bodies from all the things that we eat, including a lot of the fish that we get at the supermarket. The fish that we get at the supermarket, about 50% of those, 60% of those fish have microplastics in them. And then we're ingesting our own garbage. So let's stop using I didn't mean this to be a conservation discussion, but we need to be more connected with the ocean. And the best way to do that is to have people fall in love with it and to understand it, whether you're on the ocean front or not.
At 60 feet, does the light come down to 60 feet?
Yeah, so 60 feet, absolutely. Some people can free dive down to 60 feet. There's still light. It definitely is filtered. A lot of the spectrum, except for green and blue and purples, really don't get much further than that. But there's light down. Sometimes, you get to a zone that's a twilight zone or a midnight. Well, the midnight zone's black, but you can sort of see a little bit of blue. But 60 feet is very limited in terms of spectrums. You can see that if you take a GoPro down there and just take a couple of snapshots, everything looks kind of blue and green and maybe a little yellow, but it's not as much sun for sure. The advantage of 60 feet is that you're already saturated as a human being, as an aquanaut at 3 atmospheres. So it gives you an extended range. For those who don't dive, the benchmark or what the old benchmark was for recreational scuba diving is 60 feet for 60 minutes. And then you'd go back to the surface. Here, because you start at 60 feet, you can go down to 150 feet for 2.5 hours with no decompression obligations before you go back to Proteus. And those things just simply aren't possible from the surface. So 60 feet doesn't sound very deep, but you might as well be on the far side of Mars, because if there's an emergency, you can't go to the surface. You're saturated at 3 atmospheres. You have to first go through extensive decompression obligations before you go, which is a pro and con, right? You're giving up your access to the surface world, but you're gaining access to the bottom world. And I think that's definitely a trade worth having.
How much do we know about what happens in the ocean after the sun goes down? A lot of people just assume the ocean goes to sleep, so what do we really know about that? And what could we learn from being down there for days instead of for a few moments?
Well, many things. Those are kind of two different things, but day and night, very different kinds of activity, very different kinds of creatures come out. Of course, dusk and dawn are a cacophony of activity. That's meal time, that's socialization time, that's all sorts of things. And you see the reefs of the world or the temperate waters of the world really come out during those periods. During the daytime, believe it or not, in the middle of the day, things are fairly quiet, and that's when most people go scuba diving. And at night, you have a whole different set of animals and plants that wake up, whether it's basket stars or other lobsters, sharks, and you name it. I mean, there are a lot of animals that are very active at night, just like on land. During the night, daytime animals will go to sleep, but most nocturnal animals, it's their daytime. So it's the same thing underwater.
Do you think that, the atmospheres, 2.5 atmospheres, 3 atmospheres, if you have a space station, it just means that you're staying at that level. You can't come it still acts upon your body, whether you're actually in the water or in the space the station, right? Like, what does it mean? What does it do to your body just to be down there for an extended period of time?
Well, so that's a great question. And a few things happen. First, if you look at hyperbaric medicine, they'll put someone who has an issue, whether it's cancer treatments or healing from burns or what have you, in a hyperbaric chamber at 2 to 2.5 atmospheres so that it accelerates the healing process. So on some level, that multiple atmospheres works on our bodies as well. It gives you more energy because you're breathing in more oxygen, it gives you more stamina, but it, for example, makes your hair grow faster. It makes you sound funny. It acts a little bit on your ears because you feel a little bit more stuffy, so your voice is a little bit different. The advantages are that you start from that, but once you go out into the water column, you can stay at 60 feet, 20 meters, whatever you want to call it, or you can go down deeper, and that's just your starting point is 3 atmospheres. And it just gives you a much, much extended range. If you stay at 60 feet, you can go out in the water column practically indefinitely. And I say that in quotations because, of course, you're going to get tired, you're going to get hungry, you're going to need to go to the bathroom. So all those things, of course, are provided to you back at the habitat. But essentially, if you're going to compare or try to compare apples to apples, trying to do that on a long term from a boat versus a habitat would be impossible. Mission 31, we went out and dove, each of us, 10 to 12 hours a day in rotations. And so it gave us the ability to do something you can't do from the surface. Diving 10 to 12 hours a day, even at 60 feet or 70 feet or 80 feet or 50 feet is impractical and potentially dangerous because you're having to come back up and down, do surface intervals, get back down. and so on. And so you're increasing your potential accident issues, on top of which you're subject to weather at the surface, which you're not subject to at the bottom.
Although you have a line down from the surface, so that makes you sort of subject to the surface. No,
not necessarily. No,
no?
The Proteus will have an umbilical to shore,
Right.
but that has no bearing on whether we stay down or not.
I have a question about, so for, again, diving or being under for like 12 hours and exploring, and I think you've done all this as well, but is it comparable to, let's say you're going out on a trek, or you're going to go, like a very kind of rugged hike, or what happens to you psychologically when you're down there? I want to know what it feels like, to be down there for that period of time, and does it feel like home? Like, does it feel familiar? Well, you've spent so much time with, your whole life, obviously, but what is it like? And is it quiet? Is it noisy? What does it feel like to be down there for that amount of time?
Well, so there's a physiological aspect, there's a psychological aspect, and then there's an acceptance aspect. And it's a great question, because one of the things I've noticed during Mission 31, which is the longest mission at Aquarius that ever happened, we spent 31 days in a habitat that was never built for it. And I can say that we had a variety of experiences depending on the personality of the aquanaut on my team. Ones that were ready to leave after 31 days, ones that could do another few weeks, and then myself, who I'd say that my most depressing moment in diving history was having to give up that luxury of time to go back up to the surface, because you're at the bottom. This is a fireworks display of life. And after a few days, that whole ecosystem, your neighborhood, if you will, in the coral reef, and your neighbors are starting to accept you as one of them, because they know you're not hunting them, they're not spooking them, you're not something weird. And as any scuba diver knows, or even any snorkeler knows, if you go diving in and close to the coral reef, everything scatters. Now all of a sudden, you have animals that are just going about their business while you're going through the neighborhood. And so it's just an amazing way to look at behavior as if you weren't there. So that's really great. Now, physiologically, 10 hours of diving a day is very exhausting. I know that we ate 3 times as many calories, and I still managed to lose about 12 pounds. And I'm not a huge person.
Did you keep it off?
What's that?
Did you keep it off?
Unfortunately, no. I gained it right. I gained it back when I got to the surface. But there are pros and cons to living in a habitat. One of the biggest cons for me is a French person. I know I don't sound French, but I grew up eating a lot of international foods. Is that you're relegated to basically astronaut food, and so you're eating 5 meals a day, 3 times as much a day, for everything from M&Ms, which at first are really great, but by 31 days you don't want to see another M&M, to freeze-dried packets of food, be it freeze-dried chicken or potatoes or what have you. It was the hardest thing to do, to eat that kind of food constantly. Fresh foods don't stay under at those atmospheres because of oxidation of oxygen.
I want to pierce a little bit deeper into something you just said that was so poignant to me. And we had Brian Scarry on here. You probably...
Oh, yeah. I know Brian.
I'm sure you're great pals. And, when he was talking about that moment where the whales just know he's not an enemy, he's a friend. And so he could get a little bit closer. And you just said, like, you're in the neighborhood and suddenly life is relaxing. Like, can you just go a little deeper with that? Because that just sounds incredible. How does that express itself? Where, how do you know that the sea creatures or whoever, the life there, is accepting you? I want to know about that a little bit.
Well, I guess the best way to describe it is the illustrations through some of the stories that we have of encounters, some of the photos that we've posted and videos that we've posted. For example, there are a couple of Goliath grouper that are residents to Aquarius. And in that particular case, Goliath grouper are very docile creatures, but they're typically wary of human beings, or they should be. And after about a week or so, we would be swimming about and doing our business around Aquarius, and we would be nose to nose with a Goliath grouper we called Sylvia, after one of our close family friends, Sylvia Earle. And there was another one called Jacques, as in my grandfather. And we would be able to get close to these animals in ways that you simply can't any other way. And so that acceptance of being in their space, of something that is maybe perceived as a potential threat becoming another animal on the reef that is docile to them, gave us an entry into a connection, a very emotional connection on the part of the human anyway, that is very unique, something that is akin to staring in a humpback whale's eye, for example, the way we did in the National Marine Sanctuary in Hawaii, being able to have a kinship, an understanding, an unwritten, unspoken understanding of I'm not going to hurt you, you're not going to hurt me. We're just observing each other and hanging out and relaxing. It was very similar also with other animals, like these giant tarpon that would circle underneath the habitat. It was interesting to see some of the dynamics, for example, with the spotted eagle rays that are normally transients, they don't stick around, who at first were curious about our activities around Aquarius, but ended up sticking around for a full 31 days, visiting us every morning at about the same time. They would swim around, and at first, you're fascinated by them because they buzz right in front of you and swim around and do it again and in front of the viewports and all that. And after a while, you kind of get blasé about that amazing experience. And so you go about your business of taking sponge samples and so on and so forth on the reef. And next thing I know, the eagle ray that I was originally looking at every day, I wasn't paying much attention to, would come closer and closer and eventually would slap the back of my helmet as if to say, hey, pay attention to me. What's going on? You don't love me anymore? It's just some amazing, I mean, of course I'm anthropomorphizing, but there's some amazing experiences like this that you bring with you back to the surface that you simply can't have any other way. Imagine being able to do this and being able, I mean, we did 3 years worth of science in 31 days. And I could imagine, multiplying that by double or triple with a modern day advanced and larger platform that would be able to offer us everything that we needed at the bottom. We talk about pandemics and pharmaceuticals and so on and so forth. The ocean's a chemical soup. It's Pandora's box of solutions. We need the time at the bottom to decipher all those chemical chains that could be solutions to the next pandemic.
Have you ever been surprised under the water? Like you weren't looking and a giant fish or shark or whale came by? Have you ever had experience like that?
I'm always surprised underwater, mostly by the human beings that do silly things, but also by animals. I mean, there's animal behavior that's really sometimes really funny, sometimes puzzling, oftentimes revealing, and we're just peeking below that blue veneer as we're starting to decipher, for example, camouflage patterns that are way beyond the capability of our eyes. It becomes readily evident why a certain type of fish does what it does at a certain time or in relationship to another species around it. Because if you look at it through a special lens that you bring underwater, all of a sudden you see the world in a very different rainbow of colors. And so just that little tidbit gives you a whole new understanding, a whole new meaning for some of the things that happen there. Or if you're looking at the life and death struggles of a mantis shrimp and an octopus, for example, oftentimes those kinds of battles sometimes happen in minutes, oftentimes happen in hours. And if you're diving down from the surface, you'll never see the entire soap opera unfold before your eyes. But if you're capable of staying down for that long, you'll get to understand and see the conclusion of that story.
You have a great love of the ocean. I think that where did it come from? Did it just come immediately from your grandfather? Did it come from your family? Or how did you become so excited about the ocean yourself?
Well, my grandfather told me about this stone that you rub, and it rubs off all the passions from previous days. No, I'm kidding. No, it's funny. Once it goes back to something my grandfather used to say, which is once the sea casts a spell, it holds you in its web of wonder forever. And it's very much the way I feel because I grew up blessed enough to be able to be around water, experience ocean, experience rivers and lakes and so on and so forth, and really get to understand and be curious about this ocean of mysteries. This place at 3.4 billion cubic kilometers of volume that we have barely ever explored, even with today's modern technologies. And every time I would peek below it as a kid, I'd see something else fascinating, which was either a spotted moray eel to a cleaner shrimp to, in every square meter of ocean, you can see a soap opera unfolding in front of you. I mean, it's just an amazing place. And so just that curiosity that was sparked in me from a young age is something that has driven me as an adult. Decades later, I still feel like that little kid that wants to go put on a mask and look underwater to see what's going on. I feel like I'm missing out.
Well, Fabien,
amazing.
So much. And there's so much. You have your website, you've done a lot of, there's a lot of ways to kind of see what you're talking about.
Fabien, how long will it take to build it when you have it fully financed?
Well, we're closing round 1 at the end of this month. It's just in a couple of days. If we keep going on this trajectory, which I think we're going to be ahead of schedule, actually. But if we keep going on this trajectory, we're looking at 32 to 36 months maximum in the ocean, meaning boats will be built and we'll install it in Curacao, in the marine protected area where we have permission to do so. And that will be the first of hopefully several structures that will create a network around the world of underwater research stations to better monitor our planet and to generate new and innovative solutions and approaches.
It's incredible.
Incredible,
exciting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fabien. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure. And, this is all just boils down to something that I really cherish, that's the mantra for my nonprofit, the Ocean Learning Center, something my grandfather said to me when I was a little kid. People protect what they love what they understand, and they understand what they're taught. And so with that, we have all the elements to make this planet a planet worthy of giving back to our future generations.
Thank you, Fabien.
Thank you.
Thank you both.